And it means if you took Deca at 1,000 milligrams weekly for, let's say, a couple months during your off season, it might take 18 months before you can start improving your fertility parameters. But you're not the only one who should do medical imaging to assess the health status of your reproductive organs. I would also highly suggest your partner to do a vaginal hysteroscopy, which is a diagnostic procedure used to examine the uterus and endometrium using a thin lighted tube with a telescope video camera called a hysteroscope. A vaginal hysteroscopy provides a detailed view of the uterine cavity and helps in diagnosing various gynecological conditions, including abnormal uterine bleeding, uterine polyps, uterine fibroids, congenital abnormalities, endometrial hyperplasia, endometrial cancer, intrauterine adhesions, uterine abnormalities, retained placental fragments, and aids in the removal of foreign objects, including intrauterine devices, which again should be removed, whether they are copper-based or hormonal-based, because intrauterine devices prevent your partner from getting pregnant. Again, you and your partner will need to discuss the results of her vaginal hysteroscopy with a gynecologist or another specialist to see if she's perfectly healthy or if she needs medical interventions before a successful implantation of a fertilized embryo can occur. A vaginal hysteroscopy is particularly important for women who took performance-enhancing drugs in the past, and whether those were anabolic androgenic steroids, selective androgen receptor modulators, or ancillaries like aromatase inhibitors or selective estrogen receptor modulators. All of these can have hormonal effects on the reproductive organs, which can have a negative effect on the uterine lining and thickness, making the chances of implantation rather difficult. PEDs can also result in amenorrhea, a temporary or long-term absence of menstruation, which might have a negative effect on overall fertility as well, even though the scientific evidence can be debated. Now, female fertility is a whole subject on its own, and the negative effects that performance-enhancing drugs have on female fertility are still poorly understood. I would highly suggest any female out there that took PEDs in the past to abstain from PEDs for at least 2 years, and make sure that they have a regular menstrual cycle for approximately 1 year to track ovulation cycles properly before attempting to conceive a child. Okay, so now both you and your partner have done the initial screening to assess if there's any structural issues with your reproductive organs, any issues with semen production, the menstrual cycle, or ovulation. Once that initial diagnosis has taken place, you can proceed with the remainder of this fertility protocol discussed in this video. For you, the next step is coming down to testosterone replacement therapy, removing all non-bioidentical hormones from your protocol, and using fertility medication to recover testicular function, unless you were already using human chorionic gonadotropin on cycle or alongside your TRT-HRT protocol, in which case testicular function, testosterone production, and spermatogenesis was somewhat sustained. So during the next step, you're going to let all anabolic androgenic steroids, selective androgen receptor modulators, and their metabolites, which might be suppressive on testicular function, metabolize from your body, and then we're going to ramp up the fertility medication for spermatogenesis to get as high as possible. Here I'll provide all of the known and established half-lives of injectable steroid formulations, whether they are esterified or not, but I go a lot more in depth on how esters work and what their individual half-lives are in this video. Long story short, the half-life of an ester highly depends on the amount of carbon atoms that the ester contains and how readily these carbon atoms are cleaved off by the carboxyl esterases or the phosphodiesterases. That being said, the carrier oil in which the esterified steroid formulation is dissolved in also needs to be metabolized from the injection depot, and this seems to influence the half-life as well. Hence, for many of the steroids listed, there's a half-life range stemming from various studies using different carrier oils, examining how these esterified steroids metabolize from the injection depot in different studies. The active life of each steroid is approximately 5 times its half-life, which should allow for enough time for this anabolic androgenic steroid or selective androgen receptor modulator to metabolize from the body completely. But the metabolites might linger around for months, and the metabolites might have a long-term suppressive effect on the hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis and impair fertility parameters. So I've listed the clearance times of these metabolites under the evidence-based detection time, wherever known. Again, not all scientific evidence is available, unfortunately. Just keep in mind that the evidence-based detection time is based on single administrations, usually over several milligrams, maybe 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, 50 milligrams at most, not hundreds to thousands of milligrams following consecutive administrations for months on end, you know, the kind of stuff we do in the bodybuilding space. So I would highly advise you to stick with the reported detection time that is stemming from athletes being subject to drug testing. When they discontinue a particular compound, let's say X months later, whether that's 5 months or 12 months or 18 months later, they beat a drug test. And that's how long it might take for these metabolites to clear from the system. Doing steroid cycles just means that the metabolites will build up over time, resulting in a much longer excretion period. And it means if you took decadurabolin at 1,000 milligrams weekly for, let's say, a couple months during your off season, it might take 18 months before you can start improving your fertility parameters, because nandrolone is being produced in the body endogenously, being allowed to kept much higher than other metabolites, and thus the negative effect that nandrolone might have on your fertility parameters might take 18 months before that goes away. And then, and only then, can you really start seeing a significant improvement in your fertility parameters. Now, that doesn't mean that your fertility parameters can't come up during this time, but they will not be as stellar as having this nandrolone completely metabolized from your body, because progestogenic 19-testosterone derivatives have a quite tremendous negative effect on overall fertility parameters. So when I told you it was going to take months, if not years, this is one of the reasons why. And there's no information on the half-life, the active life, the detection time, whether that is evidence-based or reported on SARMs or injectable SARMs for that matter. So if you see a lot of unknowns in this list, my sincere apologies. This scientific evidence simply isn't up to par, and I haven't really talked to much people using SARMs and going or reporting a particular detection time, knowing that these SARM and their metabolites are completely metabolized from the body. So again, all the more reasons not to take SARMs. And if you go with the half-life of most injectable estroless steroids, suspensions like testosterone suspension, Winstrol suspension, or perhaps Trenbolone suspension, then the half-life of an injectable SARM might be anywhere alongside 24 hours with an active life approximately 5 days. The detection time of injectable SARMs might be anywhere between 3 weeks to 5 months, depending on how deep it goes into the injection depot and how long those metabolites linger in the injection depot. And again, these estimates are purely based on speculation and don't really represent how long these compounds might suppress your hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis and have a negative effect on overall fertility parameters. Still, caution is advised and give yourself adequate time for these metabolites to clear from your system. So here are the injectable androgen receptor agonists. We have boldenone acetate, boldenone cypionate, boldenone andesylate, aka equipoise, dihydroboldenone cypionate, aka DHB, drostanolone propionate, aka masterone, drostanolone enethate, methendienone suspension, also known as Dianabol depot, quite popular amongst the off-season bodybuilder protocols nowadays, it seems. Methanolone enethate, aka primobolan, nandrolone phenylpropionate, NPP, nandrolone decanoate, decadurabolin, oxymetholone suspension, also known as Androl depot, also very popular as an injectable pre-workout, Trenbolone acetate, Phenaject, but that's used in animals, Trenbolone enethate, Trenbolone hexahydrobenzocarbonate, aka parabolin, Treslone acetate, aka ment, Treslone decanoate, testosterone suspension, Aquiviron, testosterone propionate, Testaviron, testosterone enethate, Testaviron depot, testosterone cypionate, depot testosterone, testosterone undecanoate, Nebido, and various testosterone blends including Sustanon and Omnidren, and stanazolol suspension, aka Winstrol depot. All right, so all of the half-lives, the active lives, the evidence-based detection time, and the reported detection time wherever known were on the screen. You might have to pause that here and there so you know what to expect regarding the metabolism of these hormones.